Hey everyone, it's Dante Starshine here. I'm going to be making this video now. And in this video, I will look at the these two charts. Uh, there were I said I would only do two because there's quite a lot to look at when even doing a short chart analysis for a transit. So I can't really do more than two and still flow. Though maybe if people like these, I'll continue doing them and we can look at other charts for other transits. And these two charts that I picked, without even looking at any of the others, I can see how they were pretty interesting ones to take a peek at. So I'm going to pop them up. This is a sort of astrology class. And also taking this a bit because there's so many videos and messages online about this is what this astrology transit is bringing. And yes, it can bring that, but everyone's going to have such a different experience of every single transit because everybody has a very different chart. And for that reason, some of those predictions anymore because sometimes it can be almost not personal enough. Anyway, so okay. Here is this chart, and this is a Vedic chart if you're not fully familiar with this style quite yet. And the numbers indicate the signs. So the ascendant is in 5, is Leo. If you're totally new to astrology, this will be hard to follow. I'll say that. But 5 at the top, that top diamond is Leo. Now, we're watching transiting Rahu and Ketu, and in planets of signs Aries and Libra. Transiting Rahu is in Aries, Ketu is in Libra, and that conjunction of Mars, Rahu, and Uranus is in Aries. So the first thing we do is we look to planets there. And here, this is in her 9th house. You can see in the corner there. So I'll just tap it. And when you tap it, then it puts it at the top. Mercury and Sun in this house that is the 9th house. 9th house is the house of Dharma, rather, not karma. Dharma, studies, philosophy, religion, spirituality, and good luck. Now, it's a house of good luck, but with some intense planets in it. So the first thing we'd say about this transit is it throws one's luck off a little bit, or it forces people to think much deeper about things. This is especially true because just going back to the ascendant for a moment, we see here that you see the letters AL here. That's the 5th house with Jupiter, Jupiter being the ascendant ruler. And the 5th house is all about one's inner knowing and inner world and speculation, creativity, creative energy. And this is really indicative of this person. She is an artist, is one of the bigger things in her life, and a traveler. So that's all about following your own flow and following your own creativity. And that's her natural standpoint. I also have my Lagnesha in the 5th house, but it's a little different. Sorry, that's her ascendant ruler is in Jupiter. Her ascendant ruler is the sun, but the ascendant, the AL, that in Vedic astrology we call it Aruda Lagna, that's in the 5th house. So that is being blocked by things present in the 9th house. And this just means maybe it isn't the easiest time to listen to her own wisdom, and there needs to be more searching and seeking on that. This house is knowledge that comes from within us. This is knowledge that comes from outside of us. And sometimes this knowledge is the thing that helps us get into lucky and auspicious situations. It's the sun, it's the ascendant ruler. So it's the ascendant ruler because the here is the fifth house of Leo. And the ascendant ruler kind of represents our oneself and one's perspective. So with these really intense planets and quite well on top of that sun, the ascendant ruler, it can create a very hazy perspective. It can create kind of chaos, confusion, uncertainty. It can bring up, it can feel like you're cast in the shadows because Rahu casts into the shadows the sun. It what causes eclipses. So when Rahu's with the sun is eclipsed. And there's also Mars there and Uranus. So Mars is creating this exertion, intensity, drive. It can create a lot of desire. It can create anxiety. Um, and it can create impulsive actions. The positive side of Mars being anywhere is that it gives tons of energy, but is that energy expressed in a good way? Are we able to manage our anxiety to do things that are really important or not? Um, and then Uranus there, Uranus brings a desire for freedom and breaking away from old things. Not only do we have the Sun and Mercury here, we have this A7 that is the Aruda, the connection point of the seventh house that represents lovers. So this is suggesting a change in relationships as well. With all of these planets about change, transformation, there's a change in relationships and that I know to be true for this person, and it's indicated through this card. And we also want to look at what houses do the rule. Again, we talked about this a little bit as the ascendant ruler connects to the first house. That's the body, that's the self. It's good to take care of the body. It's good to take care of one's own image and identity at the time because it can be under the present planet. Mercury is ruling the 11th house of profits, and Mercury is ruling the second house of resources. So Mercury is so much this planet in this person's chart that's connected to money. 11th house is the money that comes in from outside. It's also connected to community. The second house is the money that we have saved. So it isn't to suggest that something bad is going to happen there. It can actually suggest that this is a really good time to gain and bring in money, especially as that Rahu, which is more of a tricky planet. But for this person, Rahu is in what is called Mula Chakrona. It's one of the better places for a planet to be. Every planet has places where it's happy and does well and does nice things, and places where planets misbehave. Rahu usually misbehaves, but in Virgo, Rahu is kind of using this obsessive, deep, penetrating, and focused quality of Rahu in a Virgo way, in this Virgo way that is organized and structured and to the point and clean. So Rahu just likes this. And anyway, impacts to that, the second and 11th house, yes, can mean more things coming in and a good time to focus on that. And yeah, the sun and that sun gonna feel stressed. It's gonna feel either not in or that something off with you, or perhaps alone. Especially Uranus has a quality of making one feel a bit more alone. Now we also checked with Dasha. Dasha determines if the things that actually come to play out. I don't know why it isn't loading. Okay, refresh. Okay, now it's working again. So she's in the dasha of Venus and Moon. Take it one step further. Dasha of Venus, Moon, Mercury. Venus, Moon, Mercury, Rahu. These are all planets kind of affected by this, but the one that's most affected would be Mercury. So Mercury is in one of these minor dashas. And Mercury is pretty much the closest. Mercury is quite close in degree to where this transit is actually taking place. Mercury takes front of this as well. Didn't really talk about what Mercury is. Mercury is the intellect, it's the mind, is the more, it's the more intellectual part of the mind, because the moon is the more emotional part of the mind. So when things are affecting Mercury, it creates a lot of confusion. It creates a lot of uncertainty. This ninth house is also connected to travel. This person is a world traveler. That also, the ascendant ruler in that ninth house makes a person very interested in other perspectives and cultures and wanting to go out and about. But anyway, that Mercury there, it can be, confusion, uncertainty. And the moon, I mean, there's a lot to unpack with all of her planets there in that 8th house, where you see the 12, Sakeemamo. However, that isn't really affected by these transits. There's Saturn right now in the 11th, where there's the 11. And that 7th house does make relationships hard. Saturn makes everything tough wherever he transits. So that's also another thing impacting this person's chart. And you see that there's not only Sun and Mercury aren't just strained by Rahu and Mars there, they're really strained by Saturn there as well. When 3 planets affect the house, it's a curse. And there's no natal curses in this chart. That isn't necessarily true. Anyway, this transit curse that everyone has right now, where everyone has Aries, is going through a lot of intense energy right now. But there's things that one could say as well. I mean, that you can talk about anything for forever. I'm not going to do it. I think I've said enough. But the Venus, Moon, Mercury, what else do we see about Venus? We also see that then K2 is transiting through that across the Sun and Mercury. That is house that this rules. So K2 house that Venus rules also be, it's K2 is about organization and letting go. It's also even another sign of K2 in that Libra. It's another little, anyway. But I want to just focus on the Rahu Mars blah 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 thing. Let's look at the other chart. I don't know if it's working, guys. Okay, so this chart, the first house is Aries. So that makes it even more intense when it's in the first house. I mean, that's probably one of the hardest places for anything. Really, any planet transiting the first house feels intense. If you want anything in the first house, it would be the Sun or Jupiter. But in general, we see first house things can be stressful, and some of them can make a big personality or a healthy body if the planet is good there. But this Rahu there is kind of intense, and we see this person as Rahu directly on the ascendant. The ascendant is something that somebody sees in another. So this person, as Rahu is kind of this outsider, rebel, wild one figure, this person might have that image. And as well, Rahu is associated with Aquarius. And not only is Rahu on the ascendant, Rahu is the ruler of that 11th house, Aquarius, where the ascendant ruler, or the AL, or Ruda Lagna, is. So this person is truly a wild one. And I don't know this person too well, but I see how they bring out some of those positive, fun, out there, connected aspects of the Rahu energy. But regardless, the return of the North Node to its natal position, because she was born with Rahu, basically where Rahu is now, is kind of intense because it brings you to review so much. It brings you to get in touch with what your desires really are. The first time this happens in life is at 18, and then it happens again around 35 or 36. So you get in touch with it. Rahu is all about our desires and our inner cravings, and we start to get in touch with them, and these desires then carve our life path. So this is a really pivotal point in this person's life where they're heading in a new direction and everything is changing because of this North Node thing, the return. And then there's these intense planets that are just right there by degree on this person's ascendant. So I mean, what I would say is I hope this person's okay. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourself. I hope you know that whatever's happening in your life now is passing, it's transitory, and you will get through it. And it is the beginning of something very different for you. As you couldn't have all of those planets on your ascendant without having some big changes. I wouldn't be surprised if it's some health changes as well. And especially as that Vara Lord, she's born on Friday. The Vara Lord, if you see at the top, is Venus, and that Vara Lord is about health, and Venus is having K2 with it there, and Venus is already kind of naturally with K2. So all of those planets affecting the Vara Lord can indicate some health challenge, and there might be one coming up in this moment also. This is a time of perhaps change in community. It's a time to value your community, but it's Rahu, Uranus, and Mars. There can be some aggression or outcasting or freedom seeking from community. This person might be joining a totally new community and trying a new way of life. And then those planets come to affect all of the other planets on the other side in that 7th house. These planets, I'll put them at the top. And gosh, Venus also was gonna flip it back around because that confused me. So who's ruling that 8th house? Mercury and there in the 8th. Hidden stuff coming to light. A pressure to seek and study. Changes in relationships and family. Those that UL represents marriage. A4 represents family. So changes in those areas. Sun rules 5th house. Nothing is in the 5th house. The 5th house is totally empty. The 5th house is the aspect of Rahu. So you count 5 planets from houses from where Rahu is at. That shows you where the planet aspects. Though otherwise, so the 5th house is a little weaker. But all of those planets that are affecting the 5th house lord, it can be, these planets could bring positive things as well. There's always some positive influence there. It just brings maybe a lot of intensity to the surface. You can channel that intensity into 5th house creativity to create something. And it might not be the very best creativity because they're intense planets, but it can be very therapeutic creativity. Fifth house is also the house of children. So mentioning that to see something connected with children could come up. It's also the house of decision making. So perhaps this person's being guided to make a lot of decisions. This person's likely to have a lot of intense relations, maybe. Somebody who has a lot of planets in the seventh house, they're all about the other, they're all about relating. They can be very romantic. It, of course, depends what planets are there. Um, Venus is there, which is good. Venus is in its own sign. But you see on the other side of Venus at the bottom is Mars and Moon, and Mercury and Saturn. And is how is the moon? The moon is a new, so more prolific moon, clear moon, and Mercury takes on the qualities of the planets around it. So Mercury becomes more like Saturn and becomes a more malefic planet as well. Both of those planets on either side of the sun, and K2 with the sun is quite well eclipsed, and the sun has a lot of intense energy coming towards it. So whenever something impacts the sun, you have to take into effect all 6 of those planets near the sun. They all have an impact on the sun, and I mean, that's one you could unpack for a while. I'm just bringing it to the surface. We look at Dasha, and of course, she is in Rahu Dasha, and it's Rahu Moon Dasha. And luckily, Rahu doesn't have the impact of the moon, but the moon does have impact from Mars, which can be a good thing. Mars in this case loves to be house. So the 6th house gives bring having Mars there can bring health challenges or enemies, but when Mars has some strength, which Mars does, it can actually be what helps to overcome that and get one out of health challenges and legal challenges and enemy problems. Makes one a pretty strong fighter, and it can make somebody good at diagnostics as well. So just for what we said in the beginning about this being kind of intense emotionally and having this strong impact on her community, and everything is more prominent because she is in the Rahu, so transits to Rahu are going to feel a bit more intense. And so in Vedic astrology learning, I'm in my being Vedic astrology, seeing West, though I didn't even go in deep into that aspect. So beginning astrology in a way. Regardless, we do know that when the Ashta planet, it makes these transits more prominent and intense. Sometimes we feel the transits of the planet if they are not there. This is also just generally a time of this person's life when things are maybe kind of intense because we what somebody is in, it's not much moon. Rahu moon begin in April. It lasts until September. That's not April. That's March, and then it ends in September. So Rahu is there. Moon is what's that? 6 planets. 6 planets. And the 6th, again, 6 is that house of challenges and blah matters, paperwork, daily routines, intent. It's a more annoying house. When one planet's 6 houses away, the other one's 8 houses away. So 8 is about hard work, transformation, and about feelings of blockage or sickness. And when you're in these transits, which challenge us or they force us to transform. So this is an influence in this person's life right now. That could be there until next year. But I would most tend won't last that forever or that long. There's kind of another year where Rahu is still in the sign of Aries, but Rahu is passing over. Rahu will come to a degree and then go further and further back. So it shouldn't last too long. And luckily, Mars or other planets won't be joining that sign of Aries for a while anyway. Actually, Jupiter will come into Aries at some times soon, and that should soothe things out. So, what I was going to say in Vedic astrology to soothe things, to remedy into things happening in a chart, and then we work with deities that represent those planets. The most classical representation of Rahu is Durga. So to work with an incarnation of Durga could be helpful, or a lot of this stuff is online. You can look at many other representations of the planet Rahu. And of course, figures from any mythologies can represent the planet. So you can worship forces of nature like Rahu. If I consider Rahu a force of nature, it would be the smoke from a fire, would be a volcano, it would be a earthquake or a tectonic zone. Rahu is these more intense aspects of experience. So working with those sorts of energies can make things a bit easier. And last thing, we see Saturn here is in the 11th house. That is where the ruler dogma, that AL is. It represents the self and the image of oneself. This is a hard time for your reputation and how other people see you. And as it is a life new beginning, accepting and embracing maybe the change in that reputation, the change in the image, and the change in community is going to be really helpful. Pacifying Saturn could also be something that you want to do. Saturn is more naturally represented by Kali, but of course there's many different representations of Saturn. And this is just scratching the surface. The more that I study astrology, I realize that you spend an entire life getting to know astrology in one chart. There's so many techniques that we can use. There's so many things that we can look at. And this is a dry read, which I think is never as good as with questions. So if this is interesting to you and you want to look at your chart in deeper ways, I do offer readings, and I'm going to come back on camera now. We can see how this plays out in your chart as well, and see if it offers you any insight in how to better work with these energies in place in your life, and even better understand astrology, which I myself am always doing. But the more time I do it, the more I realize it is a deep passion. Of course, channeling is as well, and plant medicine, and yoga, and blah, blah, blah. So many passions, and too little time to fit them all in this life, but I'm doing the best I can. Why don't I look at my chart too? Because I have to share the screen again. I think my chart is an example of a chart that has it pretty intense with these transits, and I'll show you why. So this is my chart, and I have the moon in Aries there, and that's where Rahu and Mars and Uranus are. And I also have the A8 that represents transformation. In that A2 finances in that 12th house. Horrible place for the A2 to be, by the way. But means they can't really hold on to things that well. Anyway, so my moon naturally has the aspect of Mars and of Rahu. Mars is 7 signs away, aspects it. Rahu looks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 signs away, and 7 and 9 signs away. So Rahu affects the moon natally, Mars affects the moon natally, and it impacts, because they're already having that impact on my moon, there's an even more intense impact on the moon as they're transiting. And not only that, oops, I need to change this to the main dasha system. Oh, that's still not the main dasha system. I'm so sorry. And so I have those on top of my moon, while Rahu is on top of the moon, and Rahu aspects the moon. Luckily, I am Mars, God, or that would have been my world. Though that 12th house is mental health, it can be feelings of isolation, it's spirituality. Moon and Mars together create a lot of energy. In the shadow, it creates anxiety. In the positive, it creates energy to do things and get things done and to be motivated and excited for life. But it can cause overstimulation as well, and our anxiety, especially with Rahu. These things have really been to the surface for me. And sometimes just feeling so anxious and wondering, why am I here? I came on a trip to Portugal and during which all of my plans changed, and it's such a different vibe than what I was experiencing before, where it feels a little bit more seems people are more deeper in their addictions here, and in this crazy late night energy all the time. And I don't know, when in Rome, you could say it has me feeling a little all over the place. Though it could be a lot worse for me, I guess. I mean, noting that this is a pretty intense transit and I'm not doing worse off makes me feel like I've come quite a long way. So that's the other positive side of astrology, is when we see these crazy aspects in our chart and we know, well, I'm feeling this, but I'm at least not having panic attacks. I've come a long way. Whoa, that was so much longer than I expected to be. But once you pull up that chart, and I guess I've had a coffee or two. Once you pull up that chart, it just gets very easy to say so many different things about it endlessly, because there's so many angles to take and so many different things to look at. And I was really curious to do that for this conjunction. Thank you for all sharing your charts. I'm sorry I couldn't get to every single chart, but I got to the ones I could get to. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions, and feel free with me for readings. And website is starshine.com. And also the channeling intuitive healing is launching pretty soon. So, well, it's launching when people sign up. DanteStarshine.com/course has all the info on that. If you're curious about it, send me a message and we can have a phone call to talk and see if it's the right fit for you. Hope you have a really fantastic day, and I will talk to you or see you in another video in the right moment. Peace, love, blessings, and magic to you, everyone.